I've always said at the end of the day, SEO is just really good copywriting. Most people think like copywriting is just writing. It's very little writing, right? It's like mostly research and like
Yeah.
thinking, to be honest. And that's what makes for good SEO too. Marketing should be the closest to the customer, but it can really feel like everybody else is closer, right? Like they talk to them. Sales talks directly to customers. Support talks directly to customers. Product directly to customers. Success. We're the only in marketing. We're the only ones that don't actually talk to them. There's the phrase DIY, do it yourself. I've always done like DIFY, do it for yourself.
Ah,
Like I've
nice.
always just built things. I just get mad. I don't see what I want in the world, so I make it.
Hey, welcome to the Message Market Fit podcast. I'm your host, Chris Silvestri, and if you're new here, this is a show where I chat with B2B SaaS folks in marketing, product, growth, and founders about how they join the conversation already happening in their customers' minds. We dive deep into their thinking, their systems, and their playbooks to see how they empathize with their audience and speak to them in a way that resonates, so they're compelled to take action. Join us and learn how you too can shape your messaging strategy and write copy that truly resonates and differentiates you. I am super excited about my guest today, Brendan Hufford. Brendan is the founder at Growth Sprints, a consultancy that helps B2B software companies break out of checkbox marketing to drive real impact and revenue. In this episode, we chat about Brendan's transition from teaching to marketing, how to find problems your customers have but can't name, the importance of proximity to customers, and Brendan's view on using AI for marketing. Let's dive right in. Hey, Brendan, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm great, Chris. I'm really excited about this. This will be a lot of fun.
Awesome. Cool. I've listened to a couple of your other podcasts. I especially like the one with Andrew Kaplan, where you go a lot about into some more like personal stuff, burnout. So you talk about how you got started, which actually it's interesting to me because it speaks to quite a big transition. So I also transitioned from software engineer 10 years, then I went into digital marketing, right? So I know that you were a teacher. Can you tell me a bit more about why you got into teaching and what did you learn from teaching that you brought with you to marketing?
Oh, big questions. Okay, so why did I get into teaching? Because we let 18-year-olds decide what they want to do with their lives. I don't know. I was immature and liked it, and I didn't think through a lot of things. And both pro and con, like the adults in my life, were like, "Sure, do whatever makes you happy." And I'm like, I probably could have used a little more guidance than that because I was either going to be like being a teacher or a radio DJ, and
Wow.
probably neither of those were gonna pan out the way I wanted them to, but I do think I would have done good at both, and I did great at teaching. I did it for a decade. I tried to climb that ladder. I have my master's degree in educational leadership, like all of those sorts of things, and it was wonderful for a lot like, the teaching part I loved. It may be similar to marketing, like, we love doing the thing, but all the cruft, like, if you're a solo person or you run an agency, like, all the other stuff that goes on, or if you're in-house, you're making decks, doing reporting. I just sometimes you just like doing the craft. Same with teaching.
Mm.
I love being in the classroom and being the show and doing less. I love all those sorts of things. What made it hard was everything else. When I decided to leave, I'll be honest with you, I had a lot of people in my life be like, "You're throwing your career away." And I laugh now even, like, saying that out loud because, like, how like, I'm throwing away a career that pays me no money, has no future progression. What would you say I'm throwing away exactly here? Because this looks like all upside to me. And you asked what I learned and have carried over into marketing. I think it's 2 things. Like, number 1 is I'm very good at education as marketing, what you and I know as, like, content marketing. I'm really lucky that's a thing that works because that's what I'm really good at. And also, to be transparent with you, I had to look for 10 years, I looked 14-year-olds in the eyes, 30 of them, every hour, every day. And if you dude, for anybody who has never taught, if you've never stared 30, 14-year-olds in the face every single hour, and you gotta be like, you have to be on your shit, Chris, because they will eat your lunch. Like, they do not care. You have to make them care. And if you do and you care about it, they love you. Not all my skills, I'm like really good at that, but I learned. Do you think about stand-up comedians? They do the same sets over and over. They work on material, right? They're trying to see where's the laugh, where do people like all of that stuff. It's the exact same in teaching. I literally would have kids. I had a kid one time, he switched classes. So he was in the first hour class, and then during the day, he got a schedule change and he was moved into my last hour class. And they just sent him twice. And I remember him in the back of the room being like, tell that joke. And I'm like, here, like he knows the jokes and the punchlines already. And the kids caught on to like, the first hour of the day, I'm like seeing where the laughs are and seeing where people pay attention. What's the story that resonates? And then by eighth period, it's clockwork. I'm running
Yeah,
through it. I know, yep,
template.
you're laughing, you're doing this. I know this, so that I got it. So all of that, none of it was thrown away. All of it is absolutely what made me the marketer I am today. I just make a lot more money and have a little bit more fun.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's been the same for me. My boss, I remember when I told him, he said, "What are you?" Especially coming from Italy, right, where digital marketing is like ages behind everywhere else in the world. Probably, it was saying something like, "What are you
Mm.
gonna do? Something that doesn't have a lot of potential." Yeah, let me try and get back to you. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's some of those things though that you realize what you learned only in retrospect, right? As soon as you make the transition, at least for me, I wasn't totally aware. Like I was still pissed of about how they were treating me, like how few money I was making. So I realized the stuff that I learned. For example, I learned a lot about UX from that job because I was
Mm.
structuring human machine interfaces, but I totally overlooked that until a couple of years after. So it's probably been the same for you. What are some of the surprising things that you realize only after that you learned?
Yeah, there's that Steve Jobs quote of you can only connect the dots looking
Yeah.
backwards. And that's that it never makes sense looking ahead. But looking back, you're like, oh yeah, that's like a very clear path. That makes sense. I was very fortunate that I have overlapped my career multiple times where I'm doing a thing and I'm doing this other thing on the side, and
Mm,
then I trade into that thing over and over.
yeah.
And this was one of those things where I understood how forums work and Reddit because I was really involved in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu online community. I started my own website. I learned how to do affiliate marketing and email marketing. I got what I call a deep generalism skill set. So you usually have like generalists who are like shallow but good at okay at everything. Then you have specialists. And for a long time, this T-shaped marketer was like a popular concept. I would argue I am not a T-shaped marketer. I'm what I call a deep generalist, where like I
Mm,
am top 1% in probably like 10 different things. And that is what I think came out of it. And I think that's what's been surprising for me is like by just this relentless, I don't just listen to podcasts. I've started 4 podcasts. I don't just like read good copy. Like I can't help but write it and stuff. Like it's on my walls in here. Like all of that, like all of these different separate skill sets that a lot of people in marketing are like, oh, that's different. They're separate disciplines, and they are to some degree. I have found forcing functions and projects where I have to do all of them
mm.
together. So I've built a couple communities to 40,000 plus people. Like I, all of these different things that maybe marketers don't get the option to work on when they're in house or at agency side. I've gotten that. And I think
Yeah.
that's one of the biggest things, like looking back, that came out of teaching and out of all of those side projects was just when you're building it. Like I think about this a lot. There's the phrase DIY, do it yourself. I've always done like DIFY, do it for yourself.
Ah,
Like I've
nice.
always just built things. I just get mad. I don't see what I want in the world. So I make it. Like there wasn't a good SEO course when I was starting in SEO. So I made it. There wasn't a good like communities for software marketers. So I made that. I just do things for myself because I want to see it
Yeah.
exist in the world. And that's what's really, I think looking back, I've had to learn all of these separate pieces and would have very much made me with the marketer that I am now.
Super interesting. So how do you deal? So you when you start something like you scratch your own itch. So when you start something like that, how do you deal with? I guess there's gonna be like inevitable imposter syndrome, or you don't have any imposter syndrome when you start those things because at the beginning you probably don't know enough, and then you're gonna have to learn, and then you're gonna have to launch it. So how do you deal with the balance imposter syndrome with actually like launching and putting out stuff?
So I'll tell you what I do deal with and what I don't deal with. What I don't deal with is imposter syndrome. I am arrogant and brash. And that doesn't mean I'm not also like extremely empathetic and sensitive and stuff like
Mm.
that. But I just have this stupid courage where I'm like, I could do that. I could do that. And what's wild, Chris, is when you think you can do it, you do a lot of the time. Like you do, or you get way further than you thought you could. So I don't deal with a lot of like imposter syndrome of, oh, who am I to do this and who am I to do that? I think that was also from starting so many side projects. Like I had so many little like problems and issues that the analogy that might be weird is like professional athletes get hit like professional American football athletes.
Yeah.
Like they're in like every impact is like a car crash. If I were to
Gotcha.
do it, I'd probably be dead. But the thing is their bodies get used to it because they're in like when they're 10 years old and they're playing tackle football, they're in small car crashes and then it gets bigger and their bodies just acclimate. And I think that's what's allowed me. I don't have imposter syndrome for most things anymore. If anything, I have to hold myself back from starting 10 new projects every year.
Uh,
What I do deal with that counterbalances that is a very constant feeling of two things being true at the same time. Number one is that I am better than everybody else. And number two is that I am a total piece of shit, unworthy of any success. And I feel both of those are 100% true 100% of the time. And I'm constantly reconciling both of them.
mm,
So that might be imposter syndrome. I don't know. But that is true constantly, where my brain is half of my brain is you're a piece of garbage, and the other half is you can do anything.
yeah.
And they're both right.
I love the
Sorry, that's why this going to be
yeah.
therapy? Sorry.
Yeah. I love the stupid courage. Yeah, that's great. You're gonna adopt it for sure. You also have, which is related to this, you have a motto which goes, work hard, be nice to people, and try not to get too lost creating something that matters. So how did you
Yeah.
come to it? And also what do you mean by getting lost on something that matters? Is it obsession or what else?
Okay, so this is really cool. I'm so glad that you brought this up. So I had a period for context for people. I've used that phrasing a lot. And then I've also put that phrasing, I vlogged for a while, like when I got really into Casey Neistat and
Mm.
YouTube. And one of the best compliments I ever had was somebody watched one of my videos and they're like, this seems like a cheap Casey Neistat ripoff. And I was like, oh, but you saw it, but you saw that it was close. You saw what I was trying to
Yeah.
do there. I watched Casey Neistat's first 100 vlogs that he did twice. So every single
Wow.
one of those, I've watched them twice. I love how he tells stories. He doesn't use a lot of like special effects. He's not Mr. Beast or whatever. But when I vlogged, I ended those because there was another vlogger that I watched a lot as well. And I adored him for years and years. His name's Ben Brown. He's from South Africa. And he always ended his vlogs with work hard, be nice to people, try not to get lost or killed. And that resonated with me so much. And I adapted it for myself because I do think that those first two are universally true, right? Work hard, be nice. And the try not to get lost doing something that matters came from two things. Number one, me, myself, like getting everything I wanted in my life. Like I went from being a grossly underpaid teacher to working at an agency, making more money than I ever thought possible, having more freedom than I ever thought possible. And then I still wasn't happy. Like I got very depressed, frankly. Yes, money solves all the problems that not having money causes, but once you solve those problems, then you have to deal with all your internal shit, which frankly I just wasn't ready to deal with, and I didn't realize it was that big of an issue. And the other piece is I read Blake Mycosky's book, the guy who founded Tom's Shoes. I think it's called Do Something That Matters. And I think for a lot of us, that's what we want. Like we want at the end of the day, especially marketers, we want to see that like two things maybe. We want to be proud of our work. We like the things we're making. And then also we want them to have impact. And I think that's what I mean by not getting lost trying to do something or make something that matters is we're just looking for like significance.
Yeah.
And I think you can get very lost along that path in a myriad of ways, right? Like getting everything you want, still not being happy, or even just like chasing impressions, chasing views, chasing subscribers or followers, whatever. You can get really lost on that path.
Yeah. Cool. Very cool. Interesting. So now let's transition from the therapy session into some more tactical questions, which actually still
Yeah,
relate
please.
because a lot of people are, as you said, obsessed with impressions, traffic. So especially in SEO, you come from SEO background content, and I'm always interested in understanding people's perspective on the difference between SEO and copywriting. So SEO, obviously, a lot of people talking about keyword research, volume, keyword difficulty. I saw a very interesting framework that it's your approach to content, which is hook, story, and offer. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I look, I'll say this, in the SEO industry, on a long enough timeline, one of two things happens. One, you either get super myopic about SEO and you look at the keyword difficulty and the all these like in made up metrics, and then you become obsessed with schema. Like you just go really into that. And all you care about is SEO, and you're just worried about the 90% of shit that does not matter. Or you take the path I took, which I think of a maturing path, and you're like, all right, SEO is a distribution channel to get great stuff found. And that's a big piece of it. I've always said at the end of the day, SEO is just really good copywriting. Like all the things that make like most people think like copywriting is just writing. It's very little writing, right? It's like mostly research and like
Yeah.
thinking, to be honest. Very little of the work is actually like writing things down. And that's what makes for good SEO too. Like a really deep understanding of who you're writing for, what their like third tier desires are, like all of that sort of stuff. Like I'm a huge fan of Eugene Schwartz. I've read all of the Ogilvy books. I think we fetishize those old marketers a lot, but there's still a lot of value there. You mentioned hook story offer. It is a framework that I got from YouTube. Again, like this deep generalism of I'm so good at all this stuff that like it transitions over where you're like, oh, that's a YouTube thing. That's a ClickFunnels thing. That's a this. Wait, that makes me better at SEO. That makes me better at email. Like all those things blend together. Hook Story offers a very simple framework that I think all content should have, all of it, which is a hook. How do I get your attention? How do I stop the scroll? In the old, like it would be 100 years ago, it would be like, how do I get you to like not turn to the next page of the newspaper and actually like stop and get you to be like, whoa, what's that? And then you start reading. Hook, get them to stop and pay attention. Story, give them like a real human story that they can relate to, and not about nothing. Not the example I always use is if you ever Google like a recipe and you have to go through 27 paragraphs of story about how it's from their Nona and how this is like a family or whatever. It's all made up anyways, right?
Yeah.
But like, I don't want to go through those recipe blog stories. Those are the worst. I want like a real story. And a lot of the SEO articles don't have that. They're immediately like, hello, you have Googled what is a CRM. You're probably wondering what a CRM is very important. And you're like, oh my God, just skip. Like,
Transactional.
I don't
Yeah.
want, yeah, it's awful. And it's just dry. And so, anyways, immediately diving into a story, tell me a story. If the first line, if I Google what is a CRM, and immediately it's, I wasted $42,000 choosing the wrong CRM. Here's what happened. Shit, I'm reading. I'm reading this. I need to know. You give me, there's 5 curiosity levers. There's all these like deeper things. I love open, like open loops is one of them. Give me an open loop. Give me a curiosity lever. Tell me I used to have information, but I've since forgotten it. Do something in there that makes me want to read. It's good copywriting, right? Goal of the first line is to get you to read the second. Goal of the second is to get you to read the third. Once you've told that story, you're making an offer. Most people in software, the world I'm in a lot, think the offer is book a demo. Nobody wants your stupid demo. Trust me, not until they're ready to buy.
Yeah.
But the offer, especially for search, is like in the content, what promise am I making here? I'm promising that after you're done with this, your life will be different. Make that promise, make that offer to get them to read. Okay, now I will read, not just skim, read the rest. Give them a good enough offer that you're like, I don't want to miss anything. So let me actually, and I might skim a little, but like, I'm going to pay attention here. That framework is used constantly in YouTube because YouTube is very democratic in some ways. They own all the metrics, so they know what gets the most clicks and what gets the most watch time and the most session time. So they'll show stuff to people who they'll show the videos that have that. With blogs, Google doesn't have that. Social networks don't have that information. LinkedIn doesn't have that. But if they did, they would share the stuff that actually gets read and consumed. But that's what we want, right?
Yeah.
I want you to consume it because then you're going to share it with your friends who are probably similar to you. All of that sort. You're going to share it because it makes you look smart because it's actually good.
Yeah.
Like all of those things that we really want in there. Hook story offer is very simple. It is not easy, but it can take you a long way on every channel. If you're doing webinars, email, social, website content, you're trying to distribute through search, doesn't matter. I don't care what you're doing, right? A billboard, doesn't matter. Like hook story offer, it always works.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Speaking of hooks, I don't know if you noticed, but lately it's been a while, probably a couple of years already, that Have you seen any of those movies, trailers, where even for the trailer, they create a teaser for the trailer? So that's, as you were saying, like using a story, super quick hook with a teaser, and then they present the trailer. And you write a lot on LinkedIn, right? So you're kind of, you have quite a big presence on LinkedIn. You must be accustomed to writing hooks. So I was wondering, since you mentioned a couple of frameworks and formulas, do you consciously think about frameworks and structure when you write your hooks, your stories, or does that come intuitively?
So I'll give you an example. I love like tease. I love a good trailer. That is a craft in and of itself. You're
Mm,
gonna take a whole film, a whole. Can you imagine doing a trailer for Dune? Dune 2 is 3 hours
my
long or
God.
something. It's like, how do we make this 90 seconds and
Yeah.
really? Oh wow, there's so much that it's its own craft, right? Now a teaser. I love. There's a movie I haven't seen it yet called Zone of Interest,
Mm,
but I have seen a number of teasers where they're really just very specific clips of specific scenes. Zone of Interest is about a family who lives in a house next to a concentration camp in Germany. And you see these two women walking through the garden and they're like just remarking on the garden and all this stuff. And it's so beautiful. But you hear fucked up stuff happening in the background and they can hear it too. And
mm,
they're ignoring it. And it's creating so many, you mentioned frameworks, like it's creating so many open loop. Like I have to resolve this. I
yeah.
have to know like, how did we get here? Where is this going? What is happening? Because they don't show you anything. Your brain fills it in. I love stuff like that. So that was top of mind. I think about frameworks a lot, especially when you know what works and what doesn't on a specific platform. The biggest one I use, I got this from two of my friends when I was working at a company called Active Campaign, Ernie Santorelli and Benjamin Elias. Benjamin was my manager, Ernie was my coworker. And they had always written about and talked about and thought about those curiosity levers. Curiosity le- you would never find them out. I feel like nobody talks about them outside of Active Campaign because it comes from like a research paper about like, the science of curiosity. And it's so Chris, it's so bad. It's scanned in. The research paper was scanned in, but scanned in crooked, and you like can't even search in the document. You actually have to like tilt your head and read it.
Yeah.
Thank God Benjamin did that stuff and loved it because it comes out with these five different like curiosity levers, right? And it's simple stuff that a lot of us do, right? Ask a question, start a list, but don't finish it. Tell them you have something they don't. Tell them they used to know something but have since forgotten it. And I think there's one more that I'm forgetting right now. But like, I think about that stuff a lot, quite a bit. I think
Mm,
about what pulls people's eyes down the page, like bullet lists and numbered lists. I do fun stuff on LinkedIn where I number backwards,
uh,
where I'm like, here's the top 20, and I do 20 and I count down to one. Because your brain is like, I wouldn't put the number one most important thing first. I want to count down, right? Like I'm constantly thinking about what gets and holds attention. Primarily, like I sell marketing services, right? So a lot of it's almost like inception. A lot of people that work with me like the marketing that I'm doing to them. I'm not really
yeah.
marketing. I'm not marketing at them, but
Yeah.
like they like what I'm doing, and they're like, "Can you? I like that. Can you come here and help me with that?" So that stuff matters, right? Like they recognize the game. It's a little easier when you're marketing to marketers,
Yeah.
or maybe not. I don't know, but that's yeah. I think about frameworks quite a bit. I've got a couple that I've created that have been really helpful, and it's always top of mind.
Do you actually, for example, on LinkedIn, do you actually compare results like engagement, for example, a post, you write these bullet points this way and then you try another way? Do you actually compare results and iterate on those? Or you're not really obsessed with that?
Sometimes speaking. So here's the thing about looking at results. I got to be good friends with a guy named Bill King. He was at Drift and then Phrase, and I believe he's at a company called Kraken now.
Mm,
And he is brilliant and a wonderful human. But he really opened my eyes to was a semi-professional or professional poker player,
oh,
and he really opened my eyes to these books about poker. And I remember I read this book called Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke. And one of the first things that Annie Duke talks about in that book is this idea of resulting.
yeah.
Where in poker, if you're a professional poker player, you know the math. I got these cards. These will win X percentage of the time. You already know that in your head. What if I play it perfect and I still lose? That's where poker players start to slide. They're like, I lost. So then they make bad decisions the next time trying to make up for it. And what they're doing is what she calls resulting. where even though you've done everything, it didn't get you good results. So now you're not going to do those right things again. And the hardest thing for poker players is just sticking to the right stuff, even when for whatever reason it doesn't work. Like, I'll give you an example. I had a post. I was so excited about this, Chris. I was like, this is gonna crush. And I posted it on a Monday that was a holiday and nobody saw it. And that sucked. And am I gonna be like, I'm not gonna post that again? No, I'm not. Or the other day, like yesterday, I posted something on LinkedIn and LinkedIn was down. It just went down. And it's that shouldn't affect how I think about the results. There's a lot of stuff. And there's even sometimes where resulting works the other way, where I make a terrible post. It's not good. By all objective standards, it wasn't helpful. It didn't do the thing I wanted it to do. But 3 big accounts left comment. The way the comment driven algorithm works, that's going to kick that to a lot of their followers, who kicks it to their followers. And like, this post could seemingly look like a success by impressions or whatever, but it wasn't. So I do think a lot about like business results. If I post something on LinkedIn and then I get 2 people filling out my form to work with me that same day, I'm into that. My ears perk up, pay attention to.
Yeah.
But the day-to-day metrics, I really don't. I think I'm very lucky at this point to be like, I have a firm belief in what works. And I just need to keep doing that. And I think about it like a campaign. It's doing it every single day, consistently. That's the volume of good work gets us there versus this versus that. But I do think about those things. Like, I think about hooks all the time. Up into the right graphs, I post an obnoxious amount of those and I don't care and I don't feel bad. I also smush them. I take the hrefs graph and I smush it vertically because it can be taller than wider. So instead of showing this long, wide, slow thing, I mush it because it smushes the X part of the axis
Yeah.
and
So
it
it's a
looks
little
really
steeper.
steep, even though it's 5 years. Why? Stops your scroll.
Yeah.
You click read more. I want to know now. That sort of stuff. Yeah, I think about those things a lot. And I know that even if one doesn't land, it's about the right people seeing it too. I also think a lot more about my friend Jay Acunzo has taught me a lot about this. Also, in case you can't tell, I'm not trying to be cool and name drop people. I'm giving credit where it's due. I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
I'm
for sure.
very lucky to have really smart friends over all these years. But Jay taught me a lot about the difference between reach and resonance. And resonating matters way more to me than like the number. Like, the last couple weeks of my posts have not done well. I don't care. I know it resonates with the right people. And so I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Quality over quantity and vanity
Mhm.
metrics. Cool. So yeah, staying on the attention topic, grabbing attention. I know that I saw a really interesting definition of demand generation that you've had, which is finding a problem your customers have but have no name for. Can you walk us through
Yeah.
what do you mean by that? Super interesting.
So I'll give you an example. I call this creating content IP. So intellectual property that we're going to use in our content. And in my world of software, a lot of the IP that we create is around naming our solution. I remember I was in-house at Active Campaign, which most people, despite making $150 million a year and having 150,000 customers, people haven't heard of them. Like, they're nowhere near the size of MailChimp. And that was mind blowing to me. I'm like, all right, we need to break into email marketing still. We're one of the biggest players, but we don't have a big brand. We have enterprise grade marketing automation, one of the best email marketing tools that exists. People don't know enough about us. And they had the brilliant idea to rebrand from email marketing to customer experience automation. What? Nobody wants customer experience automation. We now have to convince you to want this thing that we made up. That's hard. That's really hard. When you create a category, this is the team at Gainsight have said this 1,000 times. They simply wrote a wave. Gainsight is customer success. They were like, there's a thing after sales that is not support that is called customer success. And we are seeing this happen, and we are going to ride this wave and help people do. They're just riding an existing wave. Sometimes they try to make fetch happen and they end up like just trying to invent a category that nobody wants or needs. And I think our time and energy is better spent, like you said, defining problems. Let's give words to the people. So I'll give you a real life, like non-marketing, non-tech example. As a former athlete for a long time, I was very let down by like my athletic performance and the shape that I'm in and my physical strength and all these things. And I remember the same guy who gave me the words for I feel like a total piece of crap and better than everybody else at the same time, also had this phrase that he said when I read it in like a book that he had written, where he said, "I remember my body used to feel like a weapon." And goddamn it, that was the best description I've ever heard of it. So many former athletes are like, "Oh yeah, I used to be in good shape." Like they can all describe it long form. We all share this feeling of not wanting to relive former glory, but just like wanting some sense of that back. And when he said my body used to feel like a weapon, that is exactly what my body used to feel like. And I
Click.
can bullet point out, and hundreds of thousands of other people can too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that gave me words for a problem. And he wasn't selling me anything, but if he was, I would have bought it because I was like, you gave me the words for that. Another example of this in marketing is I became like really obsessed. Everybody says that like B2B is boring. Oh, B2B is so boring. B2B marketing is so boring. It's so boring. And people have given reasons for that. And what I realized was a big reason that B2B is boring is that, and this is from my experience in house and also my experience working with hundreds of software clients, mostly B2B software, is most marketers are just checking the boxes weekly. Weekly blog, weekly email, monthly webinar, weekly podcast. Check, check. Next week. Check, check. Next week. It's all output, right? There's no focus on impact. And as much as companies pay lip service, no, we care about revenue, we care about impact. If you miss your weekly blog, they will lose their minds. And it's, wait, I thought it was impact, not output. And they're like, stick to the output because then we can track it. So I made up my own IP for this. I call it checkbox marketing. The reason B2B is boring is because of checkbox marketing. And I exist, Growth Sprints, my consultancy agency, exists to help companies solve checkbox marketing, to break out of that, right? That was one of the most popular posts for the right people, one of the best like resonating posts I've ever done on LinkedIn, where I
Mhm.
was like, here's why B2B is boring. It's because of checkbox marketing. And I explained what that was. And so many people were like, yes, that's it. That's exactly it. They didn't have words for that problem before. But now that I gave them the words for that problem, the trust with me is higher than
Yeah.
other people. So instead of, yeah, finding, and this is different for every, if you serve IT or you serve whatever new moms, whatever people you exist to serve in your business, like figuring out the problems they have and then giving them, and this is fun copywriting. It's hand wavy. It's a little like marketing. We're thinking of 2 or 3 word phrases that rhyme, or maybe
Yeah.
they start with the same letter. That type of IP that's very memorable. You're like, okay, cool. I exist to solve that. And then the trust, like I said, goes way up.
And I find it super interesting because a lot of copywriting, it's about using voice of customer, right? So understanding how they speak, maybe trying to mirror that as much as possible. So how do you balance using their voice with coming up with something entirely new that's outside of their, I don't know, mental models, or maybe it's in their mental models, but that's not how they would define it.
So it starts with some like maybe formal research, but a lot of it's very anecdotal. It's just from having a lot of conversations, like being in the community. I try to, as much as I can, go even a layer deeper than like how they speak into how they think. What is the reasoning behind that? There's a book by Chris Voss called Never Split the Difference, which is about negotiation, but it's given me a lot of tools to ask better questions. Instead of, again, this is back to my Boss at Active campaign. He was a genius at this. He would do a practice called mirroring, where I would say something to him and then he would say it back to me as a question. I'd be like, I'm not super proud of the work that I'm doing right now. And he goes, not super proud. He just repeated my words back, but then made it go up at the end. It's just, and he made it a question. And then I'll go, yeah, man, this. And then I don't even like think, I just go deeper. And then he might be like, can you give me an example of that? And then I go deeper. And like all of a sudden, this one thing that you'd be like, oh, his problem is that he's not proud of his work. We get deeper and we find out it is something completely different that's going on. The problem, and if I would have done that at surface level, even the marketers that are doing good customer research might still be sitting at surface level. So when it says, oh, it saves you time, if you were selling to salespeople and you're like, oh, this saves you time, they don't care. Oh, it helps you like, they're like, all right, a layer deeper, helps you hit your quota. It helps you hit OTE. Okay, we're getting there. But when the headline says never get put on a PIP again, all of a sudden we're like, ooh. And sales training's so good, your dad will finally be proud of you. Now we're like getting into some real, and it
Is
is
that
therapy.
is that
You're like, you look, I talked to 20 salespeople, and at the end of the day, like they just want their parents to be impressed with them.
uh,
We gotta, it's not the headline, but it's in there.
yeah,
It's maybe at the bottom of the homepage, like stuff like that, where you're like, ooh, like that's where like magic is when you can
yeah,
start tapping into those deeper things. Problem is, you get like too much into the deep stuff, you forget to tell people what it is you're selling exactly. But that's bridging those two of we know even better than you what the issue is, right? Like the my body used to feel like a weapon stuff. And here's it solved through this unique framework we have that has worked for all of these other people in the past.
yeah,
And then it's, yeah, where do I write the check?
yeah. It
I don't
reminds
know.
me
People
of
don't write checks like that anymore.
it reminds me of what Brendan Hufford defines as when it comes to positioning. She defines it as like the market insight for your company. What's the insight that only you have about your market that you can use to pitch your product?
And I think there's such a value in like naming that though.
Mm,
Not just being like, we're B2B attribution software and only we do this. And you're like, yeah, but lean into the problem more because positioning is a lot about like us
yeah.
and where we are and how we're positioning ourselves. But we have to position against something. Andy Raskin calls it like strategic narrative, right? Like, what is that old game? That old game is not working anymore. We exist to help you in this new game and help you win. That's very much how I think about it. But we have to define the old game. We have to, and I love just giving it like a pithy phrase.
Yeah.
Can I give you one more example?
Yeah, sure.
Have you Are you familiar with the app Duolingo?
Yeah.
So super popular language learning app. I don't even know how many customers, an astronomical amount. The problem is there is this thing in language learning that I call the fluency fallacy, where you think that because you're on your phone and you're like getting all these badges and all these points and like your Duolingo app says you're like a 99th level language superstar. And then somebody comes to you and they try to speak. If you spoke Italian to somebody and they're like a 99th level Italian in there, they think they're fluent. And then
Mm,
you try to talk to them and you realize they speak like a 2-year old because they're not fluent in a language. They just know a lot of they know what you're saying to them, but they can't hold a conversation.
mm,
That's the fluency fallacy that exists with a lot of those language learning apps. Really, the app you need is something like there's one called Immerse, which is like for VR headsets. You can do it on desktop too, but you're like literally in the metaverse and you are interacting with
wow.
people in that language. It takes a lot of the pressure off because you're using an avatar. It's awesome. Like that it overcomes, they exist to overcome that fluency fallacy. So there's a lot of cool stuff like that.
Nice. Cool. Yeah. So when it comes to being immersed, as you mentioned, in the customer's language and in how they think, a lot of SaaS teams struggle to keep that alignment, especially between sales, marketing, product. And I like something that you mentioned, which is marketing in your company lives and dies based on the proximity to your customer. What would you recommend to teams in order for them to maintain that proximity and yeah, and keep it across the teams?
The truth is that it can feel like every marketing should be the closest to the customer, but it can really feel like everybody else is closer, right? Like they talk to them. Sales talks directly to customers. Support talks directly to customers. Product directly to customers. Success. We're the only In marketing, we're the only ones that don't actually talk to them. We just think, especially in SEO, where I come from, where they like live in their keyword tools and they
Yeah.
think that's the same as talking to humans. I had somebody finally be honest with me, and he was like, "I got into SEO because I didn't want to talk to people." And I'm like, "Thank you. Yes, that is a lot of them. They don't actually talk to humans. They just mess around. They're like, you got to learn Python." I'm like, or learn how to not be a dork and talk to somebody. But I think in marketing, it is hard. I went in house at Active Campaign, and I'm like, "Can I talk to customers?" They're like, "We already have a customer marketer, and we already asked too much of our customers." So I asked my boss Benjamin, and he was like, "Oh no." He's like, for years at the bottom of all of their emails they sent out, it was like book 30 minutes on Benjamin's calendar. And he would just meet with customers. I think that's a really easy way to do it. If I was a brand new head of content, whatever company, the first thing I would do is I would spend 30 minutes a day on a call with a customer. And then I would spend 30 minutes a day hanging out where they hang out on the internet, whether that's Reddit or in online communities or Slack or Facebook. I don't care. I'm hanging out where they hang out. I'm following who they follow. I'm listening to the podcast. I'm using there's a tool called Spark Toro. I can find out everything about these people. get an initial survey, and then when I'm actually talking to them every day, I'll get better information. But I'm doing that. Be super scrappy to start. I don't think you have to lose that scrappiness. You can formalize it. Have a customer advisory board where you're like, hey, we're thinking about doing webinars on these topics. What do you all think? What do you think? Let them be a part of your marketing. The best customers really, a lot of the time, makes them feel seen and valued.
Mm.
So I think things like a customer advisory board, and then, like I said, figure out the forcing function to get customers on your calendar talking to them, even if it's just once a week. Trust me, if this is what's so funny when people are like, we already talked to our customers too much. If that doesn't like, if you're saying that, you need to check yourself. Like, I've heard this from our customers don't really want to talk to us. Hey man, maybe let's pause for a second and be like, why is that? Because your customers should really want to talk to you. Doesn't matter. And people can make we do this or we do that. Nobody wants to talk to the company that takes away their trash. Yeah, they do. And if they don't, you should make it so they want to, right? Like, it's a pretty important waste management's a pretty important part of our life. Like, we should, and I care about that. I would love to talk to them.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. So I think regardless, like figuring out just how to stay in conversation and hang out where they hang out online is definitely the start. And then use that to bring them in.
Mm. Yeah, I totally agree. Especially now with AI horizon actually already here, a lot of companies might think that, yeah, we don't even need now to speak with customers because we have AI, right? We can ask AI everything and she knows everything,
Oh
knows
my
everything.
God.
So what's your
Chris, I saw
take?
this thing that they were like, here's how to use AI to do customer research. And they're like, I just told the AI to pretend it was my customer. And I'm like, these dorks will do anything so that they don't actually have to talk to people. Like, how do you have interpersonal relationships? Do you? Or you just go home and look at the wall?
Yeah.
What are you doing, man? And this is, again, it's my personality. Like, I love this, even what we're doing right now. I love this. My favorite part of my day. I told you I was looking forward to this all morning, even though I was late. I look forward to this stuff. Not everybody does, but you have to have somebody on your team that does love that and
Mhm.
wants to. Because I can tell you the stuff you find out from customers will confirm and validate things that you were only maybe thought to be true. And I've seen companies fully change direction just by getting a lot closer to their customers.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think AI definitely has a place still, but not for writing or not for replacing customers for sure. It's like for me, the way that I use it's a way to explore my thought a bit better, to expand it, explore different angles. So what's your take on AI for marketing? Do you use it and where do you see the trend going?
Okay, so I like it in two parts. I like it for I like it for content sometimes. Look, man, if you're small and you're scrappy and you're one person and you're like, I want to have a huge impact, figure out a system to use generative AI to draft a bunch of blog posts and then figure out a way to pull customer insights and quotes, run a model similar to what my friend John Bonini ran at Databox, where they're doing surveys of their customers and surveys of their audience in general. Pull those quotes into the article. So it's not just generic generative AI, it's generative AI as a skeleton, and then you flesh it out personally, and then you add in those insights. And it gets you to a 7 out of 10.
Mhm.
Great. Okay. And then maybe we like when we have more resources, we can add more to that. Like I get that. I empathize with those people. But I think where the real magic is in insights, where I can take a full transcript and drop it into my copy AI workflow. And it tells me, here's their top 3 pain points. Here's the 3 things they wish the product could do that it doesn't. Here's the 3 integrations they want. Here's their trepidation about signing. Take your sales calls or your customer interviews and drop it in there and let it analyze 60 minutes of horrible transcript that you can't even barely read. Because while we're communicating very effectively, if you actually read what we said, it's almost not, it's half of it is half sentences and the other
Yeah.
half is unintelligible. And we're doing good, but listening is different than reading. So ask generative AI to pull insights out of there. Ask it to pull insights out of 10,000 customer interviews or whatever, all these survey results. Oh, neat. We have asked, how did you hear about us for our last 10,000 free trials? Well, put in generative AI, have it pull out like, where are people hearing about us the most? That sort of stuff. Have it take your sales calls and from Gong or Chorus, have them summarize those, pull out the insights and put them in Slack. So now every marketer sees the And there's Copy AI does this really well with their sales calls. I've seen it. They've shown me. It's just so now I as a marketer, I am on every sales call on it. I don't have to go listen to a 60-minute gong call of them chit-chatting. I can now just read they had 40 sales calls today. I can read them all in 40 minutes. That is huge for marketers. Again, it's proximity to the customer. That's where I think the magic happens when it's about synthesizing and insights and stuff like that. So wait, the last 30 people all mentioned this thing. We never thought about that. And Google says nobody's searching for that, but I know it's been coming up unprompted 30 times. We got to make a blog on this. Like that sort of thing. Like now all of a sudden I have all my topics. And I'm not saying you immediately like then use the generative AI to write that blog, although you could. Like having a system, Copy AI also does this, where they'll take a sales call and immediately have their system draft a blog post based on that sales call. And it's,
Yeah.
wow, that's interesting. And they maybe never use it, but they have it in like that sort of stuff. I like it. Anything that allows us to make sure we don't miss things. I like using generative AI on sales calls too. Give me the summary afterwards because I want to be able to pay attention and not be like scribbling down notes the
Yeah.
whole time. Stuff like that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, you just have to be careful for some hallucinations every once in a while, but apart from that,
Of course. Yeah, over-reliance on any tool is not good, whether it's your email
yeah,
marketing
totally.
tool or your SEO tool or your generative AI tool. If you are being like, this is the throne that we're all praying at the altar of whatever tool it is, no thank you. That's just a recipe
Yeah,
for disaster.
yeah. Cool, Brendan. So, what is your challenge right now? And if you were advise someone on how to solve it, what would you tell them?
My biggest problem right now, you mean like in marketing?
In general,
I won't turn this into therapy again, Chris, I
what's front of
promise.
mind? Yeah,
The hardest thing for me right now is seeing where things are going and not having the time to match that. I came from an SEO background. I knew immediately I'm not going to rank for SEO terms. I was never going to outrank Neil Patel and Backlinko and HubSpot
yeah,
and SEMrush and Ahrefs. Like I'm not going to outrank those websites about SEO stuff. So I could try over 10 years, but I'm like, that's not what I want to do. But I knew I could make a better podcast than them. I knew I could make better videos than most of them. And so I went in that direction. And I see marketing, the trust marketing, the marketing AI cannot replace right now is video, it's audio. And I index really well like this on video. And I just don't have the time. I'm very lucky that I have a lot of client work and I work with clients I like. So I'm not making a ton of video right now. And I think everybody that does what we do should be making and I don't mean to be like Gary Vaynerchuk about this, but making a daily video on Reels, TikTok, and Shorts every single day. And you could batch it, right? You could do 30 of them at once in one day and then just drip them out. That's
yeah,
fine, like whatever. But I think like publishing every single day, seeing what's happening on those platforms, same thing with long form video. I have plans. I have a really good strategy that I'm excited about and I've never seen anybody do. And I think it'll work. I just don't have the time. So that's one of the hardest things. And I think the solution for me is simply to commit to less, not take on as many clients and just trust and believe that this will help attract perfect clients over and over again. And I think the skill that a lot of us, depending on where you are in your career, that's the hardest for a lot, especially if you're like me, you didn't grow up with like tons of money, is saying no to things. I say I have gotten to where I am in my career by saying yes to everything. And that it's the only way to progress is to say no going
yeah.
forward to more things. So that's the advice that I would give somebody else dealing with that exact problem.
Which makes me appreciate your time today even more.
Of course.
So thank you.
No, but
Uh,
to be fair, I know we're being meta about this, but this is a great example, right? I have said no to a lot of stuff lately. And I said yes to this because this was important to me. So
awesome.
yeah, man, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Cool. So yeah, I actually have the last two questions. So one
Let's do
is,
it.
where do you go to learn? Yeah, what are your favorite place to learn about marketing, SEO, copywriting?
Yep. So two of them. One is Jay Kunzo and Melanie Diesel have a community called the Creator Kitchen, which is amazing. Like the best marketers who care about the craft and want to do work they're really proud of are there. And they're doing interesting work that you don't like. You'll see these campaigns come out and you're like, wow, look at that. Really, there's a very good chance they're a member of Creator Kitchen.
Nice.
That's one. And then outside of that, there's another course and community called Grow Class that's run by Sarah Stockdale. I'm also a huge fan of them. I'm a mentor in there. So yeah, Creator Kitchen and Grow Class. Grow Class is more of a broader, more deep. It's less content and less like things like that, and it's covers everything, right? Analytics, ads. It's a deep generalism type of skill set.
Nice. Yeah, I'll check them out. Cool. Thanks for sharing. Last question is, you have this testimonial on your website that I loved, absolutely loved, which is, I trust Brendan with my life. So I wanted to
Bridget
ask you,
Boyer.
I wanted to
Yeah.
ask you, how do you create like trust for your clients, for your customers?
Well, I think you get a testimonial like that with having really cool people you've worked with. And Bridget is one of those people. I've been a fan of hers for longer than we have been friends, but I do consider her to be a friend and adore the work that she did at G2 and then Postal and Loop and Tie. And she also does a lot of freelance stuff and she's amazing. Here, listen, I'll tell you the truth. The hardest thing for me, what as somebody who says yes to too much, is doing what I said I was going to do. And that is, it is honestly a very difficult thing, but it's also a very simple thing. So it's simple, not easy, of just promising something and then doing that thing when you said you were going to do it, not over promising and then under delivering, not saying yes to everything. Make a promise, fulfill that, trade that trust into the next thing. Make another promise, fulfill that, make another promise, fulfill that. And that is one of the hardest things that even at this point in my career, when I've been doing this for a while, is still one of the hardest things. And it is, like I said, not complicated, but you have to be like very consistent with that.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. It's been great. Thank you so much again for saying yes to this. And people can find you on LinkedIn, of course, and also at growthsprints.co and allinhouse.co, which is your community marketers, right? Anywhere else you would like to point people to?
No, I love that. I appreciate you shouting those out. Look, you can just Google Brendan Hufford. You can spell it. It's not because I'm good at SEO. I just have a very unique name. Spell it however you want. Obviously, you can look at show notes for this episode and things like that. But yeah, if you just Google me, you'll find the right spot. And LinkedIn is where I consistently, people always ask me, like, have you written about this long form? Where can I like find out everything that I share on LinkedIn right now? It all starts from that. And maybe on other video focused channels soon.
Awesome. Thank you again, Brendan, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you so much for listening to the pod. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, the best thing you could do to support the show and help me as a small business owner would be to leave a review. Head over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and let me know what you think. If you don't want to miss future episodes, subscribe, and if you have any feedback, questions, or suggestions for future episodes, just hit me up on LinkedIn at Christopher Silvestri or Twitter at SilvestriChris. Speak to you next time.